student or to be more qualitative or focus on the humanistic environment in our society? Thank you.
Will you please repeat the question?
Because nowadays in my university,
Yes.
our vision is about the research university.
Research?
So, research, yes, research university, and everybody have to conduct research, and our research must be published, and it have to be the #1 research, something like this. And I found that the environment of working it changed. It's like everybody think about work, and we forgot something. When you mention about the to be great human being, how about your university? How is designed to support this concept? Let people come back to talk each other and work with each other happily. Thank you.
Research, I'm happy to know that research is being conducted at your university. Research has been made an important component now, and of late, in many of the countries, developing countries, there is some weightage given to research. For example, in our own country, any promotion from assistant professor to associate professor or associate professor to professor, for that a teacher has to have minimum 4 publications as first author. Even they don't consider second or third author, first author, associate professor to professor. This particular condition has been introduced recently. It was not there earlier. There were instances wherein the research was not encouraged earlier. Of late, the importance of research has been realized, and that is being given weightage. I am happy to know that in your university you have already started giving emphasis on research.
Yeah,
So,
and how to create the working environment that's
For
to miss the gap when the competition is very high.
best
something
is environment for research. There is lot, as far as pre and paraclinical subjects are concerned, there is a lot of leisure time that is available. If you go through the research that is carried out in most of the developed countries, the best discoveries have come out in the subjects of pre and paraclinical. Clinical research is always excellent in developing countries also, because the clinical teachers are not only practicing, but they are also publishing very good quality of papers. Pre and paraclinical, these are two important. For example, in preclinical subjects we have physiology, biochemistry, or paraclinical subject microbiology, pharmacology, where we are required to concentrate on research. These are the areas where there should be an encouragement given for research. There are a number of schemes available, international schemes available, which can be utilized very effectively in order to create an environment which is very conducive for research. It is better to offer certain incentives. We in our universities have started giving this impetus, a monetary benefit for publication of research. You have to ensure that any discovery that is made and which is patented should be duly rewarded. So this type of incentive scheme is required to be introduced so that our teachers take more active interest in research. But as far as facilities are concerned, there are excellent facilities available in our medical institutions, health institutions. But unfortunately, these facilities are underutilized. There are many instances wherein we just keep idle the instruments that we procure for teaching and research. So the best use of these facilities should be made. Incentives should be made available. The teachers managing these particular subjects should be, told about the importance of research, and there should be schemes evolved whereby the teachers actively participate in the research methodology programs. Research methodology should be made an integral component of teaching learning at the undergraduate level, in the final years, so that teachers are oriented towards this research at a later stage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Respected Chairman and today's our Guru speaker, Dr. Kokate, dear delegates, I am Dr. Arun Patil, retired professor of Nagpur City. I worked as a director student welfare for 22 years in my university. We are having more than 800 colleges in our university. My experience is that especially for postgraduate education, research and practical, that is most important. And formal teaching should be avoided in postgraduate courses. Those who are at the helm of affairs, I request them that at least in professional courses or in the health sciences, more stress should be given on practical as well as research. Because let me tell you, I will give you example of my son. He was in England and his guide used to give him weekly project. So he used to sit in the library or he used to sit on internet and he used to collect and he used to submit weekly project. So that innovative idea that comes in a mind of student. There should be informal teaching. Formal teaching should be stopped. Theory and practical should be avoided in postgraduate courses especially because that is okay in undergraduate. But in PG courses, even in health sciences, these teachers should be, or students should be, PG students should be exposed to more patients, as well as even in our pharmaceutical sciences, these PG students should be exposed to industries. Practical knowledge should be given, industrial knowledge. Because whenever our postgraduate students, they go to industry, they are fail. So that's why it is my request that definitely there is a need to change the postgraduate curriculum. So, sir, your opinion?
Postgrad, of course, there has to be much more emphasis on bedside teaching. That's very important. In PGs. If we don't allow the students to handle the clinical material, that type of PG teaching is of no use. Only theoretical knowledge is of no use. That is true. But what's happening today is lack of clinical material. And the same clinical material shared by many institutions. And that's the real fact. But then I do agree, there has to be a strong research component in the postgraduate programs. In fact, there should be a sort of mandatory requirement to have at least 1 or 2 publications out of the dissertation submitted by the students. It is seen that most of the times the students work on a project given by the guide, and once they acquire the degree, that research is totally forgotten. There is no continuity also. Another batch of student comes and they take some other topic. So there has to be some continuity of the research efforts, number one, and that continuity can be guaranteed by the teacher. If a teacher is very well focused as far as research efforts are concerned, he or she will definitely ensure that there is continuity of the research that is being undertaken in his or her laboratory. That is where I think the focus should be.
And incentive should be given, whatever research, good research the teachers or students they are doing. In our country especially, I have evaluated number of projects in our few state governments. They have initiated this idea of giving some financial grants also for continuing their research project, as well as they are giving some incentives also by giving some scholarships, etc. So that is also best idea for improving the higher education in health sciences. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. About the lecture-student relationships, I was teaching in Cyberjaya University College of Medical Sciences. For the last 4 years, we have a system of mentor-mentee.
Mentors.
So every lecture have 8 students, and they have to meet once in a week. And then also there's a time, what we call it, reflection, when the student give reflection, what they express. That's the first. Second, since we have Prof. Amia Bomi and also others and the registrar, I would like to propose, this is very important that we have to work together, because no university is perfect. They always lack in something. Frankly speaking, in students here in Malaysia, very hard to practice delivery, because very minimal delivery happen here, but in Indonesia, you can find it hundreds in the clinics. So maybe we can exchange something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So that's why I propose maybe next year, since Ibu Bibi told that next year every faculty have their own conference. I propose there is a special in education and collaboration between us within the developing country. Thank you.
There can be a very good networking, sharing of the resources, sharing of the knowledge. That should be a sustained program required to be undertaken in developing countries.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Chandra Kokate. Right. Actually, as what has been discussed, but I think the most challenge is how to develop a learning organization in most institutions that will balance between research, teaching, and service provision. I think that is the most challenge. Without further ado, I would like to thank again Professor Dr. Chandrakan Kokate for his excellent presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the chairman and his presenter. Can you please stay on stage for a while, please? Right. Because it's been an excellent presentation, and the presentation has the most participation in terms of question, so we're going to keep them upstage for a while. Okay? Because I have to make certain announcements. If not, everybody just go up without taking note of some of the announcements that we're going to make. Number one, I know it's lunch hour, so I'm going to keep lunch hour according to time. So after this, we go for lunch, and we'll be back to the hall sharp at 2 o'clock for the next session. Lunch doesn't take much time. According to health promotion, the most you need is 15 minutes. In between that, please spend some time on the poster sessions that we have outside. Now bear in mind that for this conference, the poster presentation is not here for the whole 3 days. It changes every day, like the climax. So take the opportunity to see what is it today. Before tomorrow, we don't know what will come, because tomorrow never comes. Okay? So that's number two. Number three, for those from family of Lincoln University, that includes the members of the academic, the administrative, and also, I don't like to use the students, I'll call them the young partners. I think they are partners, they are not students, they are partners. Without them, we won't be here. Now, you are also required to be here till the evening, till the session end, and please ensure that your signature is being marked at the respective table, so that you get the incentive. Remember, we are talking about incentive. I'm not me, I mean, professor is talking about incentive. I'm not able to give the incentive. All right, so anyway, those are the few things that I want to remind, and the session in the afternoon will be chaired by our Professor Dr. Shahimi. There'll be 4 speakers and also the others. I hope everyone will be on time so that we can start. But for the great speaker and the chairman that's on stage now, since, if you're aware, that this hall is been named as Dewan Tun Dr. Ismail, which is actually our former Deputy Prime Minister of Malaysia, one of the best in the country, right? So, in view of that, I would like to call upon somebody who has a similar name. So, I would like to call our Dr. Ismail Abdul Rashid, our Registrar of the College University Lincoln, to hand over the appreciation to both the chairman and the speaker. Please do. Give applause to all. And to Yang Bagi Datuk Dr. Ghani. Thank you very much to Yang Bagi Datuk, Prof, and also Dr. Ismail. So, we will proceed with the next agenda, that's lunch. with just a piece of advice. Don't overeat your lunch. Be careful of your diet. Avoid fatty foods. Reduce your carbohydrates so that you come back to the hall right on time and alert. With that, enjoy your lunch. Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we will proceed to our next session, that is technical session 2. Before we move on, is everybody happy with the lunch? Can I see some hands up, please? All right, wave at me, please. If you are here, please wave at me. Okay, since all right, that means all of us are still alive. Thank you very much. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to call the chairman for the next session, that's technical session 2, iaitu yang bahagia Professor Dr. Muhammad Syahimi Mustafa from Lincoln University College to chair the session and to invite the speakers. There is Associate Prof. Dr. V. Gopalakrishnan, yang bahagia Prof. Datuk Dr. Abdul Halim, and yang bahagia Dr. Kanaga Kumari to the stage. Can we welcome them? Give them a clap. Welcome the speakers, all right?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome back to our second session, the afternoon session. Hopefully, we are energetically more energized after the lunch. But since we are quite a little bit delayed already, about 15 minutes late, so I would like to introduce to you the first speaker, which is Associate Prof. Dr. V. Gopalakrishnan. Associate Prof. Gopalakrishnan had obtained his Bachelor of Science from PSG College of Arts and Science in 1987 with first class. Master of Science from University of Madras and also PhD in Microbiology from University of Madras in 1998. Currently, he is Associate Professor and Head of Microbiology Discipline in University Kuala Lumpur Royal College of Medicine. He is also an advisor to the editorial board of Indian Journal of Applied Microbiology. Today, he will talk about diagnosis of microbial infections as a perspective. Okay? So he's given about 20 minutes, 20 minutes, and we have only about 20 minutes. So please welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. At the outset, I would like to thank the organizing committee and the Lincoln University College, and Dr. Arindam Das for having invited me to deliver this talk. Microbes, have a profound influence on humans, and one should understand that there's a big problem in differentiating the good microbes from the bad, because we have good microbes and bad ones. And the good microbes do a great amount of job, but equally the bad also show potential in causing various diseases. A dream of the microbiologist is to diagnose these infections, all these infections, using a single test. And when that happens, that will be the breaking news. And once we get the breaking news, which is never going to happen, because we have so many agents coming up, and of recent we have the Ebola and other infectious diseases, viruses, which are causing more problems day in and day out. It all started with Robert Hooke, where he was able to look at small insects using a prototype microscope, after which the father of microbiology, Antony von Leeuwenhoek, was able to look at the bacteria, and he was hence named the father of microbiology for his various services towards microbiology. What happens in day-to-day life in a hospital is the patient goes to visit the clinician, and what does the clinician do? He takes up the history, and on his knowledge and clinical diagnosis, he comes to a decision of the particular disease and orders various tests to confirm his assumptions. And these are few of the methods where you can look at infections and their causative agents. And in the process of diagnosis, what we do is we need to take appropriate samples, send them to the laboratories, and be processed for them to be detected or cultured. In the process of culture, basically this is for the bacteria. We use conventional media and different types of special media, and for the viruses we use the cell culture. Sometimes we use animal models, but nowadays the use of animal models is just restricted to research and not diagnosis. And there are other rapid systems like the BACTEC and the API system for quicker diagnosis of bacterial infections. And for the viral infections, we have to depend on immunological methods, because culturing a virus, it takes a longer time by the time the patient has gone out of the hospital. So we need to do immunological tests and detection methods, which I'll be talking later. And the most common one is the ELISA being done, where you can detect the antigen or antibody. And this is the detection of the antigen, where you have the plates coated with known antibodies. The antigen comes, the patient sample, the serum sample is added, and you can see the respective specific antigens, complementary antigens binding to the antibodies, and secondary antibodies with an enzyme is added next, to which, when a substrate is added, color is developed and we understand the antigen is there. Other than that, we do other simpler tests like the precipitation, agglutination, and for immediate, especially in the detection of viruses, for rapid detection, we do use immunofluorescence. And HIV confirmation nowadays can be done with 2 ELISAs, but it can be done with a Western blot also. Electron micrographs are basically for research purposes, restricted to research purposes. The talk of the day is PCR, or polymerase chain reaction, for its rapidity. It's so quick, and it is able to detect theoretically even a single strand of complete nucleic acid, although you need much more in practicality. And it's an extreme sensitive technique where you can detect about a certain target DNA, which is multiplied or replicated by million times, and you can detect it as a band after running through the PCR. And the PCR, the enzyme Taq polymerase is used with repetitive cycles of denaturation, primer annealing, and primer extension. And there are so many other types of PCR, like nested PCR, which increases the sensitivity and specificity. And again, the products of these PCR techniques are either put on agarose gel to look for the specific band formation, or there are other methods where you can detect the presence of the nucleic acids. And this pictorially tells you what really happens. And actually you can see during the denaturation, the double-strandedness is parted with, and the primer, oligonucleotide primer, attaches to the 3' and 5' ends, and you get the elongation using the Taq polymerase at 56, and extension at the 72 degrees centigrade. And as we go by, this repetitive cycle happens, and you have multiples of the same target DNA which is formed, and at the end of the 1.5 or 2 hour session of repetitive cycles, you have millions of copies. And so as to say, there are so many different formats of PCR, and they have their benefits, but usually researcher uses hot start and touchdown PCR to increase the specificity of normal PCR. And these are other formats of PCR. Emphasis nowadays are using real-time, which is a semi-quantitative, and a multiplex PCR, which is an organ-based system, where it detects all the different agents that can cause infection in a particular organ. So that is very helpful in the diagnostic aspect for a clinician. Advantages, as I mentioned, it is highly sensitive, easy to do, easy to set up, and multiplex format of PCR helps in detection of various types of agents in a single run. Contamination is a problem, and sometimes initially you need to have technical people working on it to start the sessions, start the PCR setups. Real-time PCR, being it quantitative or semi-quantitative, is very useful, and there are so many different types of real-time PCR: CyberGreen, FAM, hex type, TaqMan probe, and molecular beacon methods, where the same PCR technique is used, but only thing, the output comes with the runs. As you run, you know whether the particular product is not there, and you don't need to wait till the end of the session to see whether the target is there. And the major thing is you don't have to have post-PCR processing, which takes up a little bit of time and which avoids the benefit, or which avoids the use of ethidium bromide and other carcinogenic substances to look at them. And it detects even very fewer copies, and the important thing is small fold differences can be easily detected by using this real-time PCR, especially which plays an important role when you want to look at resistance and other factors. DNA chip, again, it is a very good technique where you are able to look at all the different agents that can cause infection or various polymorphisms using a small chip which is as broad as your matchstick. But the only thing, it comes with a cost. So you have to be aware, and it's still in the developing side. Still, we don't have concrete methods where you can do the chip technology for all the infections. In the process of detecting various agents, one should remember there is sensitivity and specificity to be taken into account, and just not sensitivity and specificity, and you have to look at the analytical and diagnostic sensitivity and specificity. And the terms sensitivity and specificity should be used with the requisite adjectives, because the diagnostic and the analytical meanings of these terms are very different. Sometimes it is very confusing. The patient may be having no infection, but you are still able to detect the pathogen using the PCR. What does it mean? So this is like, you don't know whether there are 5 legs or 6 legs with this in this elephant. That's the way interpretation becomes a problem in these techniques. And presently we have improvements and requirements to go into the field to do these techniques. That's what they call it, lab in a suitcase. This suitcase is good enough. It has all the required things to be done for a real-time PCR. You just take this to a location, get the sample and run it, because sometimes the time taken for the sample to reach may be delayed and you may lose the nucleic acid of interest. So you need to do it on the spot sometimes. The idea of quorum sensing, is how the bacteria, basically bacteria or any infectious agent reacts. They have a signaling method to see that when they are good in numbers, they can initiate the battle and win the host. So quorum sensing is an important thing which is going on. It is not new, it has been going on, but not much importance has been given to this. And people are looking at different agents to control the infectious agents. But if we are able to control the quorum sensing using quorum quenching methods, again, the same benefit can be achieved to control the organisms. And it is known that organisms have selective resistance. For example, when you employ a particular type of antibiotic to control an organism, over the days of use or the methods of use or irrational use, it develops resistance. So the thought is now that is it the causative organism or the factors that decide to make them retaliate and control it, or is it that it is understood that there is an exposure-dependent resistance developing and we should look at that. So we should try to avoid usage of antibiotics so that the resistance cannot be developed and the organisms may not be able to thrive. That's all for now. And at this juncture, I would like to give my invitation to a conference being held at
be quite out of the ordinary because it is not necessary in the mainstream. But I flash back to the first slide, please. If you go to the next slide, you'll see what things were like in 1980s when I was working at University of Kebangsaan. We did we did an epidemiology of developmental disability, severe developmental disability, and syndrome. I was